We have Brian calling in from California. Brian, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, I just wanted to talk about pocket gremlins.
Hell yes. That's what I want to hear. Tell me about pocket gremlins, please, Brian.
Well, they're my explanation for things that go missing. You look everywhere for them. And then after you've given up looking for them, they turn up in a spot that you already looked. And you know you already looked there.
Yes, I'm 100% on board. I am now a believer in pocket gremlins. Thank you for changing my worldview, Brian.
I don't know whether it's I mean, I go into every call with an open mind, and I want to take everyone seriously. Is this an actually held belief of yours, or is it just a funny thing? Do you truly believe this, or is it just a funny thing?
I do truly believe in them.
Okay, well, going with that, what evidence do you have of this? Is there any way that we can detect these goblins or trolls or whatever they are?
Gremlins, Jamie. Respect the gremlins.
Look,
okay?
I've just got pocket
they're
monsters in my mind.
You're talking shit about these pocket gremlins. All right, watch out.
But I want to take you absolutely as seriously as I can, sir. And so the question, as with all supernatural or unusual or outside of what we may typically see as natural, what is your evidence?
I really haven't been able to come up with any, to be honest. I keep trying, but my theory is that they're quite small and that they transport themselves by way of some sort of wormhole.
Okay. Now, I'd like you to be honest with me, if you would. Is it actually more likely that these creatures exist, or is it more likely that human mind and memory and sight are fallible?
Well,
because we know that the human brain can be tricked. We know eyes can fail. We know that memory is fallible. These are all things that we have had tested, have had studies. No assumptions need to be made there. And if we go with Occam's razor, taking the theory that has the least assumptions made, then we have to assume that there are these creatures, these goblins. We have to assume they are invisible. We have to assume they are capable of moving and replacing our items and transporting themselves through means unknown and undetectable. That's a lot of assumptions and a lot of proof you're going to have to bring to make that theory plausible, even if it's not even anywhere close to possible. So what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I have to agree with you that is an awful lot of assumptions, but that's just like I don't want to think of my memory as being that fallible, you know. I think that I am capable of keeping in mind where I have looked, and that after numerous times of looking in the same spot, I should have seen it by then.
All right. Earlier in the show, Brian, we talked about something called the Null hypothesis. And it's this idea that if you're analyzing a situation with a potential cause, right, any two events that happen that lead you to the conclusion of something else happening, that you should assume that there is no correlation. In other words, you're noticing that you're missing some things sometimes, right? And you've come to the conclusion that pocket gremlins are responsible for these lost items. Whereas the Null hypothesis should say you should go into those two events where, two or more events, right? Where you've lost something and you don't know where it is, and assume that you just lost something and don't know where it is, or not assume anything at all. Rather, really shouldn't take the explanation of that there's any causal relationship between the two. And if we start with that assumption that there's no causal relationship with the two, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to prove an alternative hypothesis. In this case, pocket gremlins from wormholes coming into your pockets and stealing stuff. Suddenly, we have to find evidence for this beyond just these events happening. So, is there any events or any evidence that there's pocket gremlins coming in to steal your stuff rather than just losing stuff and forgetting about it? What makes pocket gremlins more likely than something with a little less things to believe in, like just losing stuff? Because I know I've seen people lose stuff before. I know that happens, right? I've never seen pocket gremlins. Don't know that that's a thing. So I don't know why I would jump to that. Does that make sense? What makes pocket gremlins more believable?
Well, in my case, it could be schizophrenia.
Okay. Could be. Do you have a schizophrenia diagnosis?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That could definitely play a part in it. And we talked about this actually earlier in the show, that mental illness, while it does, like, I tend to not assume as the first thing when somebody says, oh, I believe in X, oh, you have a mental illness, right? I don't think that's a fair thing to say, but it can be an appropriate explanation for beliefs. And schizophrenia in this case is a very good indicator, right, that a belief may be mistaken.
Yep. And I would like to just one last point. And I want to give you credit on your own mind, that I would steer you away from making assumptions and coming up with explanations based on assumptions, because that shuts down inquiry. Keep your mind as open as possible, if possible. You've just said that it might be schizophrenia. It might not be. You may have just been forgetful that day. But keep your mind open to all these candidate explanations and eliminate them using as much thought and evidence as you can get together, and talk to other people to try and get help if you need it. Yeah, that's all I want to say on that.
Absolutely. Brian, we're at the end of today's show. It's past that 8:30 mark Central Time, and I got to wrap things up. But Brian, I wish you well, and thank you for sharing your anecdote about the pocket gremlins. I'm here to tell you, I don't think that that's real, and I think that most people you talk to are also not going to be able to believe you. And I would encourage you to, find ways to evaluate that, right? That's going to be helpful for your life, because you're dealing with something that I am very lucky I don't have to deal with, and that most of us don't have to deal with. So I really do wish you well.
Take care, man.
In working on that. Yeah. Not working on that, but you know what I mean. having an affliction that's just really a difficult thing to talk about. There's some people that will hear that somebody's schizophrenic and they shy away because it's like, oh, well, we can't talk to this person, or about we can't talk to this. And obviously I'm not going to validate when somebody has a delusion. I don't think that that's ethical, but they're not going to stop being schizophrenic because you don't think about them. Schizophrenic people do not just go away. I don't know. This is a really big pet peeve of mine. I've been seeing a lot of, especially like Zoomer memes and stuff, like using schizophrenia as like an insult, when it's like it's a very real condition that people have to deal with and doesn't affect beliefs, and you have to live with that reality. And when you begin to have friends or family members that have this, suddenly you realize it's not just a game. It's a real thing, and you learn to live with it and the people around you. And because that's the best thing you can do. I don't know. That's all I can really say on that topic. Jamie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I could say stories about people I've known that have been in altered mind states and having to deal with that. It's something that I think we should normalize being able to talk about. I don't think we should automatically assume that if someone has a mental illness or is neurodivergent, we can pin everything on that. I think it behooves us as critical thinkers and skeptics to actually take in all of the possibilities and only rule in that issue that they're having if it really truly is a candidate possibility for a phenomenon they're experiencing, and don't make any assumptions. Easier to say than do, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a scary thing to deal with, but people who do suffer with it are not people you should be afraid of either. right? They're more likely to, someone with schizophrenia is more likely to be the victim of violence than to ever be the cause of a violence, right? If just because somebody is going through a delusion or has a delusional belief does not necessarily mean they're out to harm you or to harm anybody else. They're just people experiencing their worldview with the way that they were given it at birth, right? And that is just the reality of the world that we have to live in. So I appreciate when I don't know, I appreciate when people share their experiences like that. Honestly, it's very I don't know, I appreciate it. I really do. And that's all I can really say on that, because now we're at the end